You mentioned the word responsible, and I became a professional journalist in 1997. And I'm thinking about how the profession was then versus how it is now. For you, what has been some of the big that have occurred in journalism, and what do you think it's missing right now?
Well, I mean, the last 4 years has been a real big blow to journalism. The characterization of mainstream news as fake news has been incredibly destructive. Now, that's not to say that news outlets aren't biased. I mean, certainly they're biased, and you know, I think that certain outlets absolutely skew in certain directions. But when the former president disavowed mainstream news as fake, what that did is it made people turn to other sources to look for news and information. And very often they would find it on outlets like YouTube, right? And so when you put something into YouTube that may be conspiratorial in nature, what happens? Your feed populates with like information that is slickly produced with no disclaimers that what you're seeing may not, in fact, be real. And so I think that's really dangerous. Again, mainstream news isn't perfect, and there certainly are biases. But when you get out of the opinion journalism, right, because there are a lot of people espousing opinions in print and broadcast, and you get to the reporting of it, look, I mean, we have to fact check our sources for legal reasons, but I mean, there is a process, and if we make mistakes, we have to make a public apology and fix those mistakes. And so, to me, it's been really scary and unfortunate that there are so many people in this country and this world who have just come to disavow mainstream media and consider it fake. It's not fake. It's not fake. It may not, it may be skewed, but it's not fake.
Yeah, not to mention, it also doesn't help when the former president refers to journalists as enemies of the state. Um,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. It's just
yeah.
it's so dictatorial and unbelievable. And I can't believe that so many people fell victim to it. It's just it's devastating.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, I agree with you. Everything you said about what is kind of wrong about our business right now. It's not just how people think about us and the lack of trust that they have, which was certainly driven by somebody who is in the most powerful, office in the world. But a lot of it too is how we frame things. And I've been really disappointed with our cowardice collectively as an industry in framing certain issues the way we have. I think this whole both sides stuff is like bullshit. Every issue doesn't need two sides. Like if we're
Yeah.
talking about racism, what's the other side? Like
Yeah.
what is the other opinion that we need to reflect? And I think in trying to stay true to objectivity, that we have actually lost the ability to tell the truth. Because objectivity is definitely necessary, but I think fairness is actually more important than objectivity, if that makes any sense.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges to the world of journalism is that it's been so corporatized, right? And so, as far as broadcast journalism is concerned, like it has to adhere to a rating system, right? And so inevitably, the loudest voices and the most sensational stories are going to be the ones that generate ratings. And that to me is so backwards. Like the idea that your news has to rate, there's something wrong with that. Um, and again, that doesn't mean that it's fake. It just means that the things that mainstream news chooses to cover, right, are at the expense of so many other things that are happening in the news because they may not be the loudest, or it may not be what what rates, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot in this podcast at different points about representation and how important that is. I wonder, how do you feel? I mean, obviously, the world went crazy over Crazy Rich Asians. But what I noticed that happened after that is that there were suddenly these spin-offs, especially in the
Yeah,
reality world, that focus on Asian bling culture. What's your take on fixation?
so annoying. So annoying. And I think that's one of the things that I don't know. I mean, it's a shame because, again, the Asian American diaspora is so vast. Income inequality in the Asian community is the widest of any community. And so when, people have limited exposure to Asians to begin with, and they think that all are crazy rich or have bling empires, I think that's really, I think that's really tragic. I mean, I'm glad that things are starting to change, and the media is much more receptive than it's ever been to a more diverse array of stories. But unfortunately, it took Asians being targeted to recognize how invisible we have been from the media and the narrative. Um, I think it's amazing that Shang-Chi is the biggest film in the world. I hope the next big Asian film doesn't involve martial arts and rich people. I mean, I love both Crazy Rich Asians and Shang-Chi. I mean, my God, they were fantastic films. But I'm hoping that we're all ready to kind of like expand our horizons and accept the fact that, we do a lot of other things too.
Yeah, I'm sure maybe a movie like Parasite was that a nice sort of change of pace.
Yeah, the dark murders. No,
Yeah,
I'm just
I
kidding.
know. I was like, maybe that's why I said that very
Yeah, yeah,
carefully. I was
yeah.
like, was that a nice change of pace? I don't know.
You
I
know
don't
what?
know.
I actually I love Parasite. But I think that is a Korean film, right?
Right.
That was produced in Korea by Koreans. I think that we are in the center of Hollywood, right? In America. And so in America, I would really love for us to be able to expand that narrative as well.
Yeah, and I think it is important that people realize that there's a vast difference between Japanese culture, Chinese culture. Like they're so different, and unfortunately, what does happen here is that they all get kind of lumped in together. With that being said, you're half Chinese and half Taiwanese, correct?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
how those are two different cultures again. So how did you find, I guess, a comfort in figuring out how to blend, both sides of your identity together?
Well, it took a long time, Jamel, because for so much of my life, I was in denial, or just had carried around so much shame about being Chinese American. I didn't even like the idea of even claiming the Taiwanese part of me was just like unfathomable. I mean, my husband is Korean American, and when he was teased, he was called Ching Chong, and people would say like, "Stop speaking Chinese." And even for him, it was hard to fight to make that distinction because it was just like,
Mhm.
I just call me whatever you want. I just want to blend in. In fact, I just had a conversation with a Bangladeshi American comic um, whose name is spelled Aluddin, but for most of his career, he's just gone by Aladdin because that's what people called him. It was just easier to say Aladdin. There's a movie, the whole thing. And his parents used to get so frustrated with him and say, "We named you Aluddin." But he would say, "Ah, yeah, ma." He was from the Bronx. Like, everybody knows me as Aladdin. And it's just this year that he is claiming or reclaiming his Bangladeshi American identity and going by Al-Uddin. So this is something that I think is happening in the Asian American community right now. I think so many of us have just kind of like, we're proud of our identity, but because we don't see ourselves reflected in ways that are not stereotypical, we've just kind of like just gone along with the status quo, and I think that's changing, and you're seeing a lot more people in the community that are demanding to be heard and demanding to tell a more diverse array of stories.
So you feel like the sense of empowerment is growing. It sounds
I
like.
think so. I think
Mm.
so. I mean, I think that there is an overall um awakening that is positive in Hollywood, and that is that, like, someone recently said to me, like, we know all the white people stories, like we like we know the stories of success and addiction and abandonment, like we know all those stories. Like, it's time for other stories. It's time for other American stories to be able to have a kind of platform, to be understood and to be learned and experienced.